Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 21, My First Concert. Hey, Chris McBrien here, along with Yancy Eaton. This is Pop Goes Your World. Yancy, tonight's topic is one that's very, very close to your heart, obviously. All the times we talk about movies, TV shows, all that kind of stuff, music is really right in your wheelhouse, needless to say. Mm-hmm. And so we're definitely going to get to that. But before we do, is there anything you wanted to share with us from the past week? Been doing anything fun, exciting?
I mention them every single week, but Run the Jewels keeps teasing singles. Their album is coming out in January, and I'm very, very excited about that. A bunch of websites like
Run the Jewels. This is
Run the Jewels.
Yeah,
yes.
Tell me a little bit about Run the Jewels. Is this like My Neck Full of Gold?
It's just like Your Neck Full of Gold. Yeah, it's LP and Killer Mike. It's a collaboration between the two of them. It's a fantastic combination. They just feed off each other so well. They do all their own beats by themselves and stuff. It's just highly produced, super, super awesome music. It's very vulgar, but it's incredible. They're teasing stuff. At the Drive-In just released a new single for like the first time in like 18 years, which is like one of my favorite indie bands of all time. True story. I actually, whenever Instagram first came out, I thought I was like really clever. I was still like a little punk. And I was basically snagging up all these different usernames. I was creating like multiple accounts of all these band names that I love, like obscure indie bands and stuff. And I stole At the Drive-In. Like I still own the account, the official At the Drive-In. And I felt bad about it for years. I've tried giving these bands back all of their usernames so that they can use them for their official, Instagram accounts and stuff. And I gave Fleet Foxes theirs back, and they sent me a whole bunch of like swag and like vinyls and stuff like that, which kind of like rewarded bad behavior. And I still have At the Drive-Ins, and I'm trying to give it back to them, and they will not answer my tweets. So At the Drive-In, if you're listening, if you need your Twitter or if you need your Instagram account back, please, I want to give it to you. I'm sorry. I don't want anything in return. Like, please take it back from me. And I will, release me of this burden that is having your Instagram handle. Take it from me, please.
Speaking of At the Drive-In, I have a Canadian joke for you. Did you hear the joke about the two Canadians that died at the Drive-In?
I did not.
Yeah, they froze to death. They went to see the movie Closed for the Winter. I'm sorry. This is just so awful. Anyway, you want to just get to it? You want to start talking about the first concert that we ever attended? You want to jump in?
Let's do it, man.
All right, here we go. It's AT-ATs, not AT-ATs.
I do understand your reasoning with the whole hype in.
So maybe it's an American thing, AT-ATs. I don't know.
I refuse to accept that, to be honest with you.
I'm going to go all the way to the top if I have to.
Until I hear it from George Lucas's mouth.
And we'll get an answer. But
I don't have anything to back it up.
It seems pretty conclusively that it's AT-ATs, not AT-ATs.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you take things away first of all. I got a couple questions for you. So, like I said, music is right in your wheelhouse. That's your big thing. So this is your jam this week, Yancy. That's for sure. You definitely have a leg up on when it comes to music. So, what was the first concert you ever attended? The year, the band, opening act, all that kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about the first concert you ever attended.
So, I think I was 12 years old. And a friend of mine from school, really good friend of mine, actually one of my oldest friends, we're still friends today. He invited me to a Christian concert at our local ECHL, where the Everblades play at this arena. Yep. And I was like, yeah, I'll ask my mom. I don't think she'll let me go, whatever. But my mom did. And so he went and picked me up and stuff. And it was Skillet, it was Toby Mac, and it was Jeremy Camp. Three, like I said, contemporary Christian bands. They're kind of like rock bands. They'll sound like something you might see on kind of like your new metal station or whatever. But like I said, they're Christian bands and stuff. And it was, at the time, the most awesome thing I've ever experienced in my entire life, just because, like I said, I had never been to a concert before. It was my first one. And it was, looking back now, I've gone to a ton of concerts. I've gone to a lot of metal concerts and hip hop concerts. And it was probably the most PG thing I've ever been to. Like, everybody remained seated, and there was no cursing. There were no drinking. There wasn't any, there was no waft of sweet marijuana, just drifting through the air. It was very, very clean, but it was still a really, really good time. To this day, Skillet, as weird as it is, Skillet, I think it's at this point just a 3-piece band, 2 girls and a guy. one of the better bands I've ever seen live, which is really kind of weird thinking, that, like I said, it's a contemporary Christian band, but that was my first experience. I was completely hooked with live music. I had never heard of any of those bands before, and I still just had like a phenomenal time. And from then on, I became absolutely obsessed with live music.
And that was in 2000, I guess it was. You said you were 12 at the time, so it was around.
I was like 12 or 13. I can't remember the exact age yet, but my family, I have a bunch of siblings and stuff like that. So for my family to take all of us to a concert was asking a lot, just financially and logistically. So going to concerts and stuff, it wasn't something that we ever really did a whole lot. So once I started becoming like a preteen and like a teenager, then I started going to shows and stuff by myself. But I think that was the first one. I could be mistaken, but from what I can recollect, that was my first concert.
So it was Skillet, and who else was there?
It was Skillet. It was Toby Mac, who I used to be obsessed with, and then the other one was Jeremy Camp, who kind of like Toby Mac, except a little bit more rock. Toby Mac is kind of like, he does a bunch of different stylistic things. Like he'll do like hip hop and pop music and just like straight rock and stuff. But Jeremy Camp's a little bit more just like new metal rock type of stuff. Really nice voice, good singer, all like super, super Christian. They're all, they're all wearing Jesus Freak t-shirts and wearing like conch seashell bracelets and stuff. So it was just it's weird to like look back at that time, because like I literally thought those dudes were like the most metal thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah, have you ever heard of a band? So speaking of like Christian rock, especially Christian sort of hard rock,
I know who you're going to talk about.
Stryper.
Go ahead.
Right?
Yes, I knew you were going to talk about them.
Because I remember they had an album called The Yellow and Black Attack, and they all wore like the yellow and black, like like the Killer Bees. They were like Jumpin' Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair. They were the Killer Bees, right? And
they spelled it with a Y.
But yeah, they spelled it with a Y. Stryper, exactly. So by the way, that my Killer Bees is a wrestling. Is a wrestling reference to you. I know you're not really big into wrestling, but we definitely got to do a show on wrestling at some point. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I just remember Stryper being like this heavy metal Christian band, but I'm not really familiar with their music. I don't know. Do you know them? Have you listened to them at all?
You know what? You're not the first person to mention them to me. I got into like this whole phase where like I was listening to like just tons of like Christian metalcore bands, which is like it's almost discernible, completely undiscernible that they're Christian music at all. It's really hard with, breakdowns and heavy guitars and stuff like that. And a bunch of people would always tell me like, hey, you should check out Stryper. You should check out Stryper, like older guys, middle-aged men and stuff like that. And I did listen to them. I'm not going to lie. They're not fantastic. They're not bad. It wasn't like my taste. If that were the first thing I were introduced as far as like that genre of music, I think I would have liked them a lot more. But it's almost like listening to like Led Zeppelin and then somebody being like, you should check out Air Supply. You know what I mean? I'm like,
right.
No, I don't
I think I'm good.
So.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so. Well, speaking of heavy metal, we should talk a little bit about the first concert I ever attended, and this was back in 1984. And of course, I've mentioned on the podcast many times that my favorite band was Triumph. And so go figure, that was the first concert I ever went to. It was in 1984. I was 14 years old. And I remember, so I'm from a town called Port Elgin. It's in Ontario. It's a really small town. And I remember at the weekend, I went down to my buddy's place. He lived in Kincardine. It was just down the lake from us. And so we went down there, we hung out, and then we actually, it was a bus tour that was set up from some people in his town had set it up. And we took a bus from there, us and a whole bunch of other people, down to Guelph, Ontario. So Guelph is, I don't know, town of about 85,000 people in Ontario here. And
can you spell that for me, Chris?
Guelph is Guelph. And Guelph, yeah. And so it's a city, like I say, about 80,000 people, something like that. So we go down there and we went to the arena there in Guelph. And so like at the time, when you come from a town of like Port Elgin, like I went into this arena, like it was like the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. Like it was this huge arena, which I bet you if I went in there today, I'd be like, holy smokes, this thing's small. But, at the time, right. 14, you think it's the biggest thing ever. And so we go in there and I know you mentioned the sweet smell. I remember that was one of the things that really struck me was the smell. And I was like, oh my, I'm still 14 years old. I don't know anything about this kind of stuff. I just wasn't, It wasn't my thing, right? So I'm like, oh, what's that smell? Holy smokes, you can smell drugs in here, right? It's like, oh my God, what's going on? And the opening act was Helix. And anybody that's from Canada, they're going to know all about this. So Helix was a band. They were Canadian. They were from Kitchener, Ontario. And they were pretty popular. Like they did have a gold album. I think it went gold in the States. It was called Walkin' the Razor's Edge. It came out in 1984. And the big song on there, Rock You. You know the song?
Yep.
Oh,
yes.
My goodness. Good. Okay, so they had just released that album. So they were big in their own right. And the thing was, too, right around that time, Much Music came out here in Canada. That's the Canadian version of MTV, right? But in Canada, you might not know this, Yancy, but in Canada they have what's called CanCon. Okay, so it's called it's Canadian content. There's laws in the country that if you're going to play music, you have to play 30%. It's like 33% of the music has to be Canadian content. Okay, and it was a rather controversial law that came out right around that time back in the 80s, and the idea being that we wanted to promote Canadian music, right? And so the thing was, when Much Music came out, this legislation that came out made them play 1/3 of all their videos had to be Canadian. So it really gave life to a lot of bands like Helix and like Honeymoon Suite and bands like that. Corey Hart all got all this exposure because of this legislation. But one of them was Helix. So Helix became really popular with Rock You and all that. They'd been popular for a while. Like, they had done an album that was called No Rest for the Wicked that came out just before that, I think it was. And there was a song on there called Heavy Metal Love. One of my favorite heavy metal songs of all time, by the way. I love Heavy Metal Love. But then when they came out with Rock You, they kind of really got big. So they opened up. And I remember they came out and I was just like, oh my God, these guys are great. And one of the things that struck me was, Brian Vollmer was the lead singer. And
Is he the one that died?
No, he's still alive. He lives in London, Ontario. He actually, what he does now is, he had a funny story, just as an aside. The band broke up around 88 or something like that. And he actually fell on kind of hard times. At one point was actually working in a convenience store to help make ends meet. Like, he was down on his luck because one of the things was he never had any vocal training. So, and he really rasped it out when he was singing, and he never ever had any vocal training, and he ruined his vocal cords. And so he couldn't sing anymore. And when you're, a guy with long hair that does heavy metal in the early 80s, that's all you can do. You know what I mean?
Like, that's kind of pigeonholed. Yeah.
That's your gig, right? So without his voice, he ended up really fell on hard times. But what happened was then he fell in with somebody who taught him a technique to rebuild his vocal cords and to kind of work them back in. It was a proper vocal coach. And so he went on and actually formed what's called Planet Helix, and it's in London, Ontario, and he trains other people on how to do this technique. And so he's really, sort of kind of got back into things that way. But anyway, Helix was really, really popular at the time, so they opened up. It really killed me when Brian Vollmer got on stage because he was swearing. And he was dropping F-bombs and stuff like that and saying rude stuff. And I just remember, I'm 14 going, oh my God, it was kind of cool in a way. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's speaking like this. Like, I don't hear this, So it was kind of edgy, I guess, for me. And and I really liked a lot of their music. They did a song on that album called Make Me Do Anything You Want. It was a cover of a Canadian band called A Foot in Cold Water, but I liked Helix's version better. I don't know, I just always did. But anyway, so they did their thing. It was heavy metal, loved it. And then I thought, wow, that was really good. And then Triumph came out. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if you're familiar with Triumph at all. I've spoken about them before. But there was
I know some of their catalog. I'm not their biggest fan, but if you played them, I could probably pick them out.
They did get some exposure in the States. A couple of their songs actually got quite a bit of exposure in the States at the time. I think one of their biggest was Lay It on the Line, probably got the most exposure down there. But Magic Power got a lot of airplay in the States when it came out around 81. But in 84, they had just come out with their new album, which was called Thunder 7. And one of the big songs on there, the big song on there, was called Follow Your Heart. And Spellbound was pretty big too, but Follow Your Heart was this big song on there. And so anyway, they came out on stage after. So as a 14-year-old, I go to this concert, I see Helix, I think they're the greatest thing ever. Oh my God, those guys are great. And then Triumph came out and just blew the place. It just blew everyone away. It's a power trio, right? There's Rick Emmett on guitar, Mike Levine on bass, and Gilmore on the drums, and they were just phenomenal. The thing that struck me the most is that just how amazing they were as musicians. The only drummer that I personally think that's better than Gilmore was another Canadian, Neil Peart. So from Rush.
I'm aware of his work.
He's obviously amazing, but I think Gilmore is right behind him in terms of ability to drum. So since he's moved on from the band, Gilmore has he formed a recording studio down in the Toronto area called Metalworks, and it's known worldwide. People come from all over. Katy Perry's been there. People come from all over to record there. So he still stayed in the game that way. But anyway, the thing that it blew me away how proficient that they were on their instruments. And at one point, they're doing Rock and Roll Machine, which is a big song from the 70s from them. And then Rick Emmett went into a guitar solo. Now, at the time, too, I'm 14. I'm just kind of really getting into playing the guitar. So Rick Emmett was an idol of mine. Because I just couldn't believe he was such an amazing guitar player and effortless the way he plays. So I just thought he was the greatest ever. And to watch him do Rock and Roll Machine, and then in the middle of the song, Gilmore stops playing drums and Mike Levine stops playing bass, and they both walk off the stage, and Rick Emmett did like a 15-minute guitar solo. It's like really like kind of self-indulgent, I guess, but it was like this 15-minute guitar solo. And then they all come back, and then the other guys go off the stage, and then Gilmore does like a 10-minute drum solo. And it was but they were just so good. And I just remember thinking, that's what a concert is all about. It just blew me away. So that's my experience. It was quite an experience, let me tell you, for the first time out.
Let me ask you a question about that. Mm-hmm. So you said you were 14 years old, right?
Yes.
So who'd you go with?
So I went with a buddy of mine that lived in Kincardine and a bunch of his friends from Kincardine, and they were all right around the same age. So we were all young, and we were all in grade 9.
And your mom let you go?
Yeah, so she did. So I went down to my buddy's place, and I stayed there at his place for the weekend with his parents. And then me and him and all of his friends got on this bus trip, and we went down to Guelph. It's not like it's all that far. It's like maybe like an hour and a half drive to Guelph, and went to see the concert, and then the bus brought us back to his house, and we stayed there. So
did your mom give you any ultimatums before you left?
No. The thing was, I think, like, and I'm not just saying this, like, I was a pretty good kid. Like, I was a pretty good teenager. Like, I mean, I like to have a lot of fun. There was no two ways about that. But I was good. Like, I wasn't into drugs. I didn't really, like, I wasn't a troublemaker. So right. I think that, I ultimately had the trust of my parents, growing up. And they knew that I wasn't going to do anything bad. And I didn't. I didn't do anything wrong. I went to a concert.
Yeah, that was kind of the same with me too. Like I have 3 siblings, 2 older and 1 younger, and I love my siblings. We're all still super close. I was just hanging out with them this afternoon. But like we're all different, every child's different and stuff. And I was like you too. Like I was rambunctious in school. I did like stupid stuff, but like I also never ever lied to my parents ever. Like they never caught me lying to them. I was just always straightforward with them. And as a result, like there was like this incredible trust between the two of us. So like they let me do things that even whenever I asked, I was surprised that they would say yes. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm 14 years old. Can I drive with my friends to West Palm Beach to go to a concert? It's going to be a metal concert, and I don't know what's going to be there. Yeah, sure, that's fine. Just, I trust you. Just don't take anything from strangers. And yeah, sure, go ahead, go. And like I never compromised that trust all through high school. And like that's what like enabled me to do all of these things and see all this stuff. And like my siblings were getting in and out of trouble and stuff like that, where you love all your kids the same is what my mom would say, but you kind of have to, there's like a sliding scale as far as trust, you know what I mean? And like I was very, very fortunate because like I was going to tons of concerts in high school. Like once I got that first itch of going to my first one, I just wanted to keep going and going and going. And like every summer, I would go to multiple Warped Tour events, and spend the entire weekend with just, people that my mom barely knew and stuff. And she was totally cool with it. I never gave her a reason not to trust me. But man, to be 14 again, though, I was looking up too while you were talking about Helix, Chris. They toured with some big bands. Kiss, Aerosmith, Rush, Motley Crue. Like they were close. They were close to like really breaking through.
And the thing was that they almost, when you speak about breaking through, they almost sort of did, because as soon as Walking the Razor's Edge, after that one came out, the next album that they had was called Long Way to Heaven. And the thing was, on that one, it was kind of funny because it was like that was their big attempt to break into the US, because the very first song on it is called The Kids Are All Shaken. And one of the more like the lines in it was, the kids are all shaken in the USA. And as Canadians, we were like, hey, well, wait a minute. Like, are they selling out to the U.S. with this? Like, so I think that album really hurt them because they alienated their Canadian fan base, and they never really broke into the U.S. because the rest of the songs on the album weren't very good. That song is actually pretty good if you listen to it. The Kids Are All Shaken. It was actually a pretty good song, but the other rest of the songs on the album aren't very good. So they never really found that success, that they were looking for. Helix did, as opposed to Triumph, like I say, that were, they played some pretty big concerts. Triumph did, and they went on to some big things. It's funny because then Triumph's the album that they came out with shortly thereafter was The Sport of Kings, and on that there was a song called Somebody's Out There, and it is hands down the most radio friendly song that Triumph ever put out, because they were a progressive rock band, so they did things differently. You know what I mean? Like their sound was kind of different. It didn't always just fit the mold. But Somebody's Out There was like, if you get a chance, go on YouTube and look up Somebody's Out There and listen to it, and it's right from the opening notes on the keyboard. You're like, oh, this is really radio friendly. Like it's a radio friendly song, good vocals. It's nice and clean, but yeah, it never really broke into the States that big either, and they ended up breaking up almost immediately after that album came out. It's just funny, they never really found that huge success, kind of like the guys that were in your first concert. They never went on to big, huge success either, really, if you think about it. But,
yeah, I mean, they still tour. They still make a living off of it. But yeah, they never became mainstream or anything like that. But
So why was it, again, just to go back to yours for a second, so why was it those guys? Why did you go to that concert? Like, why a Christian rock band, of all things, to go see?
I mean, to be honest with you, I was just a kid, and it was one of my buddies in school, and his family was very, like, let's get your friends involved, and like let's get kids in church, that type of thing, and they just invited me, and I said yes. It wasn't I wasn't interested in these bands. I'd never heard of them before, but like it was just something to do on like a weeknight. That's how you know too that like how good of a concert is it going to be if you're going to like a Christian concert on like a Tuesday night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like I said, I just had a really good time, and like I owe him the world because it really did it just like catapulted me into like I want to start going to shows. Like this is fun. This is a lot of fun, and I want to keep doing this.
See, it was funny when I was that age, like even all the way through high school. You know how most of the time in high school people are sort of pigeonholed into cliques, right? Like you've got like the rockers, and you got like the preppy guys, and you got but the thing was for me, I was very unique, I guess, because I got along with every group, because a lot of those groups didn't get along too well. The preppy people did not get along with like the popular people didn't get along with the rockers, and they thought but me, I got along with everybody because I could play the guitar. And so I had a band in high school that was a power trio again. And we were, so people kind of like knew us or whatever. They thought we were cool, because I could play the guitar, I could sing. But I also, got along really good with all the popular kids too. So I got along with it was a unique situation. High school was very unique for me. It was a good time. It was a very good experience. I never felt pigeonholed into any group. But one thing that I always did like was I always liked heavy metal. I liked loud, heavy music. I always appreciated all the guitar that was in it, and I really liked that a lot. And so I always liked Triumph. I thought Triumph, like I say, Rick Emmett was just a hero. Like the way he played guitar, it just blew me away. Thought he was fantastic, and I was lucky enough years later in '93. I was working in Toronto doing children's theater at Ontario Place, so it's a place down in downtown Toronto, and I was down there doing children's theater, and all the actors were where our dressing room we shared across the hall from all of the acts that would come in and play at the Forum at the time. And so I got a chance to meet all kinds of really, really amazing people over the years. But my favorite was still Rick Emmett. The day that I got a chance to meet Rick Emmett and talk to him, I was just like, oh my God, it was just so cool because he was always my hero. And to be backstage and just have a chance just to talk to him. Super nice guy. We didn't get a chance to talk long, but, I did say, what an inspiration he was, and just kind of talked about that. And so it was really, really great. I was very lucky enough to meet him. So that being said, I want to flip it on its head for a second. Years later, years go by now, and, since I was 14, like many, so that was in 1984. So what 32 years have passed. I'm curious. So it's a big time for me. I'm old, right? But even for you, from 2000 until now, 16 years have gone by. What was the most recent concert you went to?
Man, honestly, it's kind of embarrassing because the last 3 or 4 years I haven't gone to concerts.
Please say Christian rock. Please say Christian rock.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't any Christian rock. Honestly, the last concert I went to was I think 4 years ago. My wife took me we flew to New York, and she's texting me right now, actually. That's very weird. We flew to New York in Poughkeepsie, and it was freezing cold. It was in November, and our favorite, actually, it was a Christian band. I'm so stupid. Yeah, she and I had a mutual longing. Like, all right, so from the time I was like 15 to 20 or 21.
Please say Striper. Please say Striper.
It wasn't Striper, I promise. No. Our favorite band, we both collectively had the same favorite band, and it was Under Oath. They're a Christian metalcore band, and I was obsessed with them. She was obsessed with them. After I went to the concert as a 14-year-old, once I turned 15, I was going to Warped Tour, like I said, at least once every single summer. I would go to the one in Orlando. I would go to Vinoy Park in Tampa. Sometimes I'd drive up to Orlando with my friends. I loved going to these concerts because you could see 30 bands in a weekend. You know what I mean? You could see all these bands that you loved. A lot of them were junk bands that you would, they would tour once and you would never hear from them again. They would disband, or, they just didn't get any traction, so they'd give it up. But I was just obsessed with these bands. So Under Oath was like the first metalcore band that I saw. And you were talking about how you loved metal just because of the guitar work and stuff like that. You played an instrument, so you could appreciate that level of musicianship. It was the same for me with drumming. I've drummed since I was 15 years old. I don't talk about this a ton, but I can play the out of some drums, right?
Nice.
I can play all kinds of percussion, drum sets, snare drum, marimba, keyboard, xylophone. I love it. I love percussion. Played it in college, orchestras, jazz band, symphony. That is my joint. That is my you know what I mean? I love it. And so, like, to listen to these bands where these guys are just, they have double kick pedals, and they have, just rows and rows of floor toms, and, 8, 9, 10 cymbals, and they're playing with splashes, and they just, it's like this whole, this gigantic setup of percussion excellence, you know what I mean? And it just got me just obsessed with metal. Like, I loved it. I loved every type, grunge metal and death metal and metalcore and just breakdowns and, getting into the mosh pits and stuff like that and just going crazy over these guys. So I'm making this a really long answer, but I'm just, we went and seen Under Oath. Like I said, they were in Poughkeepsie, New York. And what's really funny is if my wife was like, hey, do you want to catch a concert the next night too? And I told her, no, don't worry about it. We'll just go to the one concert and then we're going to fly out that next night. When we get there, we look on the poster. Guess what the concert was the next night? You'll never guess it, but it's a very big – I'll give you a hint. He just won a Nobel Prize for Literature. He was performing the next night.
I don't know. Who was it?
Bob Dylan.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you couldn't stay and go?
We could have. I didn't even bother to ask her who was performing. We could have got like this sweet package deal for both shows for that weekend. And I said no. I could have seen Dylan live, and I just said no. So I still kick myself for that. But Under Oath was the last concert that I saw. I'd love to go to some more concerts, and I'm starting to talk really fast and get really loud because I'm like getting excited, and like my face is like
awesome.
is like getting hot because like I'm just thinking about it, man. Chris, I love concerts. I love going. I go completely all out. I'm the dude just like jumping and throwing people, and just it's such a good time for me. I need to go. Now that we're talking about this, I need to go to a concert, maybe a Triumph concert.
You do? Oh, you should. Too bad that they're not together. You do me a favor though, since you're a drummer, you should go onto YouTube and find some Triumph stuff and tell me what you think of Gilmore. I'd like to know your opinion. Maybe off the air at some point.
Sure.
Let me know. That's for sure. And just as an aside, so were you ever in a band? Were you ever in a band in high school or anything like that?
Not like formally, not like a formal like a hey, we're a band, but I was always doing stuff with band. Like I was in jazz bands and stuff like that where we had, designated players and stuff. But unfortunately, all of my friends were drummers, all of us.
So you can't really have a band with all drummers in it.
Yeah, we all wanted to play the same thing. So like that's kind of why I started learning, piano and marimba and xylophone and vibraphone and stuff like that. And
every good rock band has a xylophon player.
Every good one.
That and a flute.
We need more glockenspiel. You know what I mean? Like, but man, I don't even know where I'm going with this. You can tell I'm kind of like losing myself here.
You were never in a band though. Like you were never actually in a rock band.
I was not, unfortunately. No, I had jam sessions with friends of mine. A real good buddy of mine, Devin. He played bass guitar, and we had another friend who played electric, and we would just do like covers basically, but never actually wrote anything original or recorded anything or anything like that.
Funny enough, because I was in a band in high school, and it was called Poverty Bound, and there was 3 of us in the band. But the funny thing was we didn't do any covers, not one. We wrote
all original.
All original, and I mean that's really tough when you're a bunch of teenagers,
Yep.
playing at local gigs and stuff like that. And of course, everyone comes out and they're like, "We don't know your songs." You know what I mean?
Play something we know.
Play something we know. Like man, play like "Sweet Emotion" by Aerosmith. I'm like, well, here's one of our songs. And it was really tough, but I really liked it. And one of the gimmicks that we had, I guess, for lack of a better word, was sometimes in our second set and stuff, we would switch instruments. So I was the guitar player, we had a drummer, and then we had a keyboard bass player. And then we'd switch instruments. I'd go and grab the bass, or I'd go on keyboards, and then he'd go on the drums. And then next set, we would switch again. I'd jump on the drums. And it was just kind of a...
That's mad respect.
It's goofy.
If I saw that, I would be so impressed by that.
Yeah, it was a goofy kind of, I guess, gimmicky thing, but it was something that we just liked. We wanted to be different, but I mean, I don't know. I guess we were really into it, and we wrote all of our own stuff. I was really proud of some of the stuff we wrote. But right near the end of high school, the one guy moved out west, and then I was going on to university. So split. And I've been able to stay in touch with those guys ever since. And we, even to this day, like we'll message each other back and forth, and we'll just say like, I'll just randomly like message them like names of some of our songs. Like, Life in the City or blah, 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 all these songs. And they're like, oh, yeah, they just remember that. And, like, it was...
Poverty bound, baby.
That's what we were. So, yeah, it was an interesting time. I'll tell you about that. But, I should mention to you what the last concert was I did. So... it's very interesting. Your first concert is Christian rock. Your last concert is Christian rock. My first concert was Triumph. And just 2 weeks ago, for my birthday, my wife says to me, hey, just like yours, your wife, hey, let's fly up to Poughkeepsie. My wife says, hey, I'm going to take you out for your birthday. We're going to get a babysitter for the kids. And I'm going to take you out because I know you'll love this guy. I'm going to take you to go see Rick Emmett in concert. So 2 weeks ago, we went to see Rick Emmett in concert. I think I mentioned that to you a couple weeks ago that we went to see it. It was phenomenal. Like the guys.
Did it go like this, though? Did you say, hey, I got a present for you? I'm going to get a babysitter. And you're like, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. Baby's okay, let's go. That's the present. Where are we going to go? I don't care. We can go to the library, for crying out loud.
Oh, my God.
Just get a break from the kids, right? I hope they're not listening. But, so we went down to Mississauga. It's called the Living Arts Center, and we got a chance to see Rick Emmett there. He's got a new band. They're called Resolution 9, and we watched them play. And it was nice. They played a couple of their songs that they've done since, but the majority of the night was all Triumph songs, and it was just great because even in the middle they did Magic Power, which I don't know if you've ever heard that song or not. It's one of their most popular Triumph songs. In the middle of Magic Power they went into like a 10-minute guitar solo. Like it was just great. I don't know. It really depends if you like that stuff or not. But like I say, if you get a chance, go on YouTube and listen to some of Gilmore's drumming and let me know what you think. I'd like to know from a drummer, like a real drummer, what your thoughts are on that. But anyway, you ready? You want to mess around with the millennial for a little bit? I got some trivia questions for you tonight.
Before we hop into that, I have one quick question for you.
Of course, lay it on me.
What was the best band or performer you've ever seen, and what was the worst?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I would say definitely the best band that I ever saw was Triumph. And the worst only I don't really want to say this, but the worst was only because there was like no members of the original band sort of left, was the Doobie Brothers. I went to see the Doobie Brothers in 1989 or something like that. I wanted to go see the Doobie Brothers, but at the time I think they had a bunch of guys that weren't in the band and stuff like that. And so I really, really was disappointed in the concert. So what about yours? What's the worst concert you've ever seen?
For me, the best concert I ever saw, I think it would have probably been that Under Oath one, just because it was a full production, like in an actual arena and stuff like that, light shows, everything like that. All my favorite music. That was awesome. They're not the best band, but like I said, just from like the nostalgic effect, like when you listen to somebody when you're 16 years old and that's like your band, even whenever you kind of grow out of that music, like I don't listen to metal core much anymore with like breakdowns and stuff like that, but it still holds like a special place in my heart. The worst band I ever saw live was actually Kool and the Gang.
Oh, wow. These old bands, eh?
Yeah, I went to a man, what was it called? Up at the University of Florida. I used to live in Gainesville for about a year, and they had like every single year they have, it's like Gator Fest. I can't remember what it's called, Gator Fest or something like that. But it's like in the stadium, and they have a couple acts come in. Normally it's like hip hop groups or something like that. But for whatever reason, this year it was Kool and the Gang, and they were so bad. Like they were so old and so bad. The drummer is like in his own world. Nothing's happening. Like they're playing Get Down on It, which I love, and they just killed it. Like it was so bad. It was and I saw Lynyrd Skynyrd too in that same concert. Actually, Lynyrd Skynyrd used to be one of my favorite bands of all time. Man, they should hang it up, man. They really should. Like it's sad seeing these old bands that like they're just collecting a paycheck. They're living off royalties, and they're just touring off of band name. And Lynyrd Skynyrd is like one of those bands where it's like, Alan Collins and Ronnie Van Zant died. Like the band should have died with them. You know what I mean? I know that sounds kind of morbid.
No, but you're right.
Like
the band's done.
It's like that is the band. You know what I mean? It's like it's like Led Zeppelin touring, and there's no Bonham. You know what I mean? Like really? It's just I don't know. But they were terrible. Kool and the Gang really bad. If you guys see them in town, don't go see them. Don't go see Lynyrd Skynyrd, as much as I say that. But
I just thought of another one too. I don't know if this counts as a concert, but one time I remember my buddies from university came up to Port Elgin, which is my hometown. They came up, and it was in the wintertime, and the weather was really, really bad. And so we decided we'd go to a bar and see this band play. But what happened was the weather was so bad that the band couldn't make it. So the bar got this like alternate, like this, just these guys in town to come out and play, and they were horrible. Like I mean, they were just awful. And my one buddy started kind of John, like we just kind of like speaking up. It's like, oh man, you guys are awful. You guys are terrible. And so the guy on stage goes, oh yeah, buddy, if you think you get any better, why don't you get on stage? So we did. So we went, and these are guys I hadn't played with, but we jumped up on stage. The one guy was a guitar player. I was a guitar player. One guy could play a bit of drums. So we jumped up on stage, and we said, okay, we will. So they're like, okay, man, go for it. So we jumped on stage, and we played a set. I remember I jumped on the microphone and the guitar, and I did a David Wilcox song called My Eyes Keep Me in Trouble. I'll never forget that. Oh, jeez. So I don't know if that one counts. But anyway, time now to have some
fun with Yancy.
Okay, Yancy. Here's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you some questions about major concerts in history and see how much you know. Because this is your jam. You know music. So let's see how much you know about really, really famous concerts throughout history, okay? So, really easy ones to start you off, as always. Okay, so this band, their last scheduled live concert took place in Candlestick Park. That's in San Francisco, by the way, Yancy.
Correct. I'm a baseball fan.
I know. It took place in Candlestick Park on August the 29th, 1966. The interesting thing about this concert, though, was that it was only halfway through the career of the band, which then ended up focusing solely on creating studio albums for the rest of their career. Yancy, can you name this iconic band that stopped touring halfway through their career?
They stopped touring.
Stopped touring. And just focused on doing studio albums. 1966. Iconic band.
I mean, that's kind of confusing because I'm getting confused here. I want to say the Beatles because I know the Beatles around. Is it the Beatles?
It is the Beatles. Now, they did do an impromptu concert on the rooftop of Applecore Records in 1969 with Billy Preston, but that Candlestick Park concert was the last time that they ever performed live. Go figure.
In America, too, no less. Isn't that weird?
Yep, go figure. Okay, so this famous concert event took place over 3 days from June the 16th to 18th in 1967 in California. Some of the notable acts that appeared at the event were Jefferson Airplane, The Who, Grateful Dead, and the Jimi Hendrix Experience. In California, what was the name of this famous concert event?
Oh, man, I don't know. Where's Woodstock at?
That's in New York. This one was in California. It was in Monterey, California.
I don't know, Christopher.
Monterey Pop. Have you heard of Monterey
never.
Pop? Oh, my goodness. Geez, I tell you. Okay. Oh. This singer was famously arrested following his bizarre and drunken behavior on stage at the Dinner Key Auditorium down in your neck of the woods in Miami, Florida, back on March the 1st, 1969. His onstage antics included exposing himself to the audience.
Oh, I know what this is. This was our American poet, Jim Morrison.
That's correct. Yes. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier my buddy Devin. He's a dear friend of mine. Unfortunately, he's got some really like acute mental disorder. Don't really have like much talking with him. This is kind of dark, but one of my best friends growing up all through middle and high school and stuff, and he was the biggest Jim Morrison fan. Like he had like this, I'm not kidding, Chris, like an 8-foot poster of Jim Morrison, like the album cover, from the Doors, like where he has like his shirt off and like, he's like flexing and whatever. Like he was a good looking dude, but like literally plastered, like it covered half his wall. So every time I even think of Jim Morrison, like I think of my buddy Devin, but it's funny that you would bring that up.
Okay, December the 6th, 1969. 1969 was a big year for concerts, apparently. Anyway, this concert, which took place on December the 6th, 1969, was supposed to be headlined by the Grateful Dead. But the band refused to take the stage because of the growing amount of violence that was taking place during the concert. So the final act to take the stage was the Rolling Stones. And during the Rolling Stones performance, an audience member, Meredith Hunter, approached the stage with a gun and was beaten to death by a security guard. And by the way, the security guards at the event were famously made up of members of the Hells Angels. Can you name the concert?
Oh, what state was it in?
It was in California.
California. I remember reading about this.
This was way before your time.
It was like the Stones. It was the Grateful Dead. It was like Jefferson Airplane. It was like a monumental lineup of like 4 or 5 bands, but I can't remember the name of the concert.
It's the Altamont Free Concert. Okay?
Oh, okay.
All right, so this one is the most famous concert of all time, I'm sure, Woodstock. Okay, it obviously famously took place in August of 1969. Again, 1969, I tell you. So Jimi Hendrix, he obviously famously closed the festival. with his rousing performance of the Star-Spangled Banner on his guitar, if you remember. So Jimi Hendrix was the final act of the festival, but who was the first act to open up the 3-day Woodstock Music Festival, Yancy?
Who? Let me think. It's going to be a guess. It's going to be a pure guess. Can you give me a hint?
His initials are RH. I don't think you'll get it. I really don't think. It's a tough one. It's either you know it or you don't. It's Richie Havens.
Oh, no idea.
And the funny thing is that he went on stage, so he was the first guy. He was supposed to play for an hour and a half or something. But because of the traffic, the local highways were at a virtual standstill, right? A lot of the other bands couldn't get there in time, so they just tell it, keep playing. He ended up going back out and doing like 4 or 5 encores, and then he finally ran out of songs to play. So you know what he did? He improvised a song based on this old song that ended up becoming a song of his called Freedom. He just improvised it on the spot because he ran out of songs to play. So go figure. Just interesting trivia about Woodstock and other concerts. But hey, listen, always great to talk to you. You know, went a little bit late tonight, but hey, talking about concerts, like I say, that's your jam, that's your thing. If anybody would like to reach out to us, they can do so on Twitter at Yancy Eaton or at C. McBrien, or shoot us an email, Chris or Yancy at popgoesyourworld.com. For Yancy Eaton, this is Chris McBrien saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at C. McBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.